This piece on the self is taken from The Science of Emotions by Bhagavan. The Self, read by Dave Marsland of Cardiff Theosophical Society. It is no mistake to call the self the most elementary factor. It is not possible to analyse it into anything which is simpler, more intelligible, more directly present to a living being. The self, towards itself, combines in one ever-present mood, conscious or subconscious, deliberate or otherwise, but ever-present all the same, the three modes in which it, when individualized, grasps the world, those of cognition, desire and action. But the mood of the self towards itself may indifferently be styled self-consciousness, self-knowledge, self-cognition, or self-feeling, self-desire, the will to live, or self-assertion, self-manifestation. To say that we think before and after, that the life of the self is made up of memories and expectations, is only to describe what accompanies it, what is involved with rather than in the self and self-consciousness. To say this is not to analyse the self into any simpler constituent elements. It is not to show that the self is made up of any elements which do not already presuppose it. It is the same with other endeavours to analyse the self. A myriad of doubts may cluster about its nature. There is not possibly any doubt as to its existence. But there is no use entering into further discussion on this point here. That discussion properly belongs to metaphysics as distinguished from psychology. It is enough for present purposes to say that the self is the indispensable first basis of life. Non-doubts, am I or am I not? Indispensable to life in the same degree is the not-self, something other than the self. When the world which is cognized and desired and acted on as something different from the self, it is named the not-self. It cannot be reduced any further, even as the self cannot be. Life is a relation of which the two indispensable and only factors are the self and the not-self. Equally universally known and recognised, and perhaps equally impossible to analyse into anything simpler, are pleasure and pain, the two feelings proper, which in alternation are the constant accompaniments of the self. Most psychologists assume a third state of the self, indifference. Indifference is a fact, yet theoretically analysis will always show in any specific case that indifference means only a very mild degree either of pleasure or of pain. For the purposes of this essay, it is not absolutely necessary to determine whether there is such a third state or not. It is enough to be sure that the two states of pleasure and pain exist. It was said just now that these two are perhaps equally impossible to analyse into anything simpler. This was said in order to avoid opening up another discussion not immediately relevant at this stage, but it may be mentioned in passing that a slight but elucidative reduction of these into terms of the self appears to be possible, and a statement thereof may be found to be unavoidable later on. The full discussion, however, belongs to the metaphysics of the self. The next step is that with pleasure goes attraction, liking, with pain, repulsion, dislike. The mood of the self towards its attitude, its condition in the presence of that which causes it pleasure, is desire, attraction, liking, the wish to be nearer. The opposite mood towards that which causes pain is the mood of aversion, repulsion, dislike, the wish to be more distant. Generally speaking, in the most comprehensive sense of the terms used, it is true that whatever pleases is liked, whatever pains is disliked, and the primary consequences of pleasure or pain are, on the one hand, the desire to take in, to absorb, to embrace, or on the other hand, to throw out, to push away, to repel the object causing the pleasure or the pain, respectively. This desire to be united with an object is love, to be separated from it is hate. An attempt is made now and then to derive love from hate or hate from love, to reduce the two to one or the one into the other, but the attempt does not succeed. The case is the same with all other inveterate pairs of opposites: light and darkness, pleasure and pain, sin and merit, birth and death, etc. The element of truth behind the effort, and which is the reason why it is persistently made, is that each one of such a pair is inevitably dependent upon the other and has no significance of its own without reference to the other. And such indefeasible interdependence implies a common underlying unity. The element of error in it is that it overlooks the fact that the many is the many and cannot be reduced into the one, into less than many without the abolition of both. The archetype, of course, of all such cases is the absolute itself, the supreme self, wherein the self and the not-self coexist as inseparable opposites in the unbreakable relation of negation. It is the same with such triplets as those of cognition, desire, action, etc. And finally, on realizing the partless continuum of the whole world process, the case is seen to be the same with everything. Everything is seen to imply and therefore carry in it everything else, always and everywhere. In such interdependence of pairs may be found the reason why either is always passing into the other in endless rotation, light into dark, pleasure into pain, love into lust or hate, and pure into the impure, birth into death, pursuit into renunciation, the physical into the superphysical, and back again endlessly.